Mark, I really appreciate you jumping on here and doing this with me today. When it comes to anything form related, you are my go-to source. So for anybody who doesn't know you yet, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll jump in here and get this thing started.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Mark Westguard. I'm the founder of WSForm. WSForm is a WordPress form plugin. And my background is I've had a web agency for about 27 years. And I was
Poor guy.
oh, I know. Yeah, I was big in it back in the Netscape 1 days, through the .com boom and bust. Had great fun with that. And more recently I've been involved in the WordPress plugin world, hence WSForm, which has been around for about 5 years now, and really enjoying working on it and building it and being part of the WordPress community. So, we try to sponsor as many WordCamps and stuff as we can to be part of the community. And great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I camped out at your booth a lot at WordCamp US. I found myself there pretty often. Thought they're going to be sick of me pretty soon, but
We had some good conversation.
that's true. And free pins that were very, very organized. So y'all had the booth thing down. All right. Well, sweet. Let's jump in here. So I guess the first question I wanted to ask, obviously, I think this gets more difficult as AI becomes more prevalent, just like anything else. But I will sometimes get tricked on whether this is a bot emailing me or this is an actual human being. And I have seen actual human beings, I'm not going to read their email, but maybe I'll read that form submission. So when it comes to getting spam through your forms, how much of this is just mass emails of bots going through and doing things, and how much is actually humans in there going through and doing the spamming?
It would depend on how good your spam strategy is as to how much of it is actually spam that you're reading, but there's an immense amount of it. It depends on which platform you're using as well as to how vulnerable you are. The more well-known form plugins out there are going to get hit more so than the more niche form plugins, just because they know the techniques and the ways to get through. But it seems strange, doesn't it, that people just want to send you absolute random waffle through your fan, but there seem to be people out there that still want to do that. What we're going to discuss today is just minimizing that spam that's coming through, and there are so many different techniques out there. So I think we're going to run through 5 or 6 key ways of preventing that form spam. But there's unfortunately there's a lot of it. You'll find that your email reader like Gmail is filtering a lot of that spam out. But the more that you can prevent on the front end, the better for you, because this stuff can have a real negative impact on your hosting, on your site performance. If they start hitting your site up really bad, then you're going to get a slow site or a site that just stops. So this stuff is critical.
Yeah, and it's even more critical when you're talking about doing this for clients who, maybe their contact form is the way their company operates. Like, this is how we get paid, is getting contacts through this form.
Yeah.
So if you're way too aggressive and nothing's coming through, obviously that's a big problem. Or if they're just getting inundated with crappy messages all the time, that's a huge problem. So
your form is your salesperson, So if that form's not performing properly, those leads stop coming in. And for a lot of people, that form is then their number one communication channel. Forms can be put to the wayside a lot of the time during development. They can be a pain to put together, but they are critical to your customer, so you really want to pay attention to it.
Absolutely. All right, so let's talk about some of these prevention techniques. I think full disclosure, Mark put together an awesome blog post that I'm going to be publishing along with this, and has kind of categorized some of these different options for preventing spam. I think the first one we're going to talk about here is pretty interesting, just form validation. So tell us how, there's some things we can do and just how we actually set up our form that's going to help prevent spam.
Yeah, so there are different levels that we're going to talk about in terms of stopping that spam coming through. Some are more effective than others, but your first line of defense is really, we could probably talk about web application firewalls as well, but the client-side validation side of things is basically validating field input on the client side. And when we say client side, we're talking about when you're actually in the web browser, before it even gets submitted to the server. So things like required fields, pattern matching. So pattern matching is ensuring what somebody types in is in a format that you want it. Maybe they're typing in a particular code and you can use a pattern to filter that and make sure it comes through. Things like image upload, so making sure they're uploading the correct file types, correct file sizes, and things like that. So there's lots of different validation things that you can put on the front end of a form to make sure the data you receive is accurate. Now, the one thing to bear in mind with client-side validation is that could be very easily overridden by these spam bots. And they will, when a spam bot hits your site, they don't care about this client-side validation. They're just going to try and send the data directly to your server. So that's why, yes, it's important. There are some people that will come on your site and try and fill out the form and submit it. But the more intelligent spam bots are going to completely circumvent that. So that's where we come on to the next level, which is kind of the server-side validation. And what server-side validation is when the web server receives that form, it's going to go through the post content that it's received, and it's going to make sure that that is valid. So again, it's going to check for required fields. It's going to check for pattern matching. So you're really looking for a form plugin that can do the client-side validation, but also then revalidate that on the server side and make sure it's receiving the information that it wants to.
Yeah, it's kind of like these things are probably fairly easy to implement, but they're also not going to do you a whole, they're not going to end spam for good, for sure.
Yeah. So don't think by making your fields required and, using an email field for capturing an email address is going to stop this, because it's not. There's a bit more work that we've got to do. So one of the most popular ways that people try and prevent form spam is what's called a honeypot. And what a honeypot is, it's a hidden field on your form. So usually using CSS, they'll actually move that field out of the way so that you can't see it on the form. And the user therefore doesn't know that it's there, doesn't fill it out. When the form is submitted, that field is empty. And on the server end, we're going to say, okay, if that field is empty, we're pretty sure this isn't a spam bot. If it's got some data in it because a spam bot has just filled out every field it can, then we think it's spam and we won't allow that through. So again, honeypot is a very primitive way of preventing spam. It's traditionally been fairly effective. It does have some problems though. It is kind of genius. And it's a very simple solution. There are some drawbacks to it. There has been known in the past that some browsers will try and fill out that hidden field even though it's off the screen. If you have autocomplete enabled in your browser, I know Safari, I believe, was quite bad at doing this. It would try and fill that field in, and as a result of that, it would then be classed as spam, and you wouldn't receive that inquiry. So, nice little solution, few little issues with it, and also nowadays spam bots are getting a little bit clever on the honeypot side of things. So they'll see a field that has maybe a crazy name on it or a funny looking label, and they'll go, I'm not touching that, and they'll submit without that. So again, I think with all of these things that we're talking about, all of these measures, there are ways around it. Even the captures that we're going to talk about, AI can, if you upload a capture image to an AI system now, it will tell you where the traffic lights are. It can get around it.
I can't even do that half the time.
Yeah, we can't get through it, but AI can. We need AI just to submit the forms. But yeah, the key here is kind of having a multifaceted strategy for your form spam. Don't just rely on one thing, and do it ahead of time. Do it proactively. So that's Honeypot, and Honeypot is usually very easy to set up in your form plugin. There's usually just a checkbox for it, and off you go. And you'll find that in all the major form plugins that are out there.
Yeah, I imagine anybody sophisticated enough is going to figure out, Mark's form does a honeypot like this, and Gravity Forms does it like this, and it's probably pretty easy to get around once they figure out whatever those patterns are. Yeah, and we've done some stuff to kind of randomize that a little bit, and a lot of the form plugins have done that. But again, it can be got through. But sure. It's not a bad thing to implement. So one of the things that I use that was on your list of things that could be helpful here is something I use but don't fully understand what I'm doing with it, and that's Cloudflare. So I put all the sites I manage through Cloudflare mostly for ease of updating DNS records, and then there's a bunch of other stuff they do that seems really helpful and I don't know a ton about. So when I saw this on your list as far as like a firewall in there, that's pretty interesting to me too. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, I really like Cloudflare. I'm not endorsed by Cloudflare at all. I just think they have a really good product. So Cloudflare, so one of the things that you want to think about is how do we stop that traffic even getting to our website? So before they even hit our server with that traffic. And one of the ways of doing that is by using what's known as a web application firewall, and Cloudflare can offer that as a service. There are also some hosting providers that inherently have Cloudflare in them, such as Rocket.net is a great one. They actually have Cloudflare Enterprise on the front end of their hosting, which can help out with this stuff. But a number of things that they can do is, first of all, they can do IP blocking. So if you can do what's called IP throttling. So if somebody comes to your form and submits a form submission, and then they do it again and again and again, Cloudflare can detect that and can then prevent those form submissions from coming through. So you can say, look, I only want a maximum of 2 submissions per minute from any given IP address. And that can be a great way of stopping that coming through. Again, spam bots can be clever. They can come in from different IP addresses, right? So again, there are ways around this, but it's another good thing that you can implement. You can also, unfortunately, a lot of this spam comes from overseas traffic. During COVID, it just got crazy. And with Cloudflare, you can block traffic from other countries if you want to. So, if you're 100% US-based business, don't want to deal with other countries, you could block other countries if you wanted to. So that's another thing that you can do. And then it also has a web application firewall built in, which is based on what's called ModSec. And they have a rule set which is WordPress specific. And what it can do is prevent malicious traffic coming to your website. That it can look for certain patterns and certain words, and that can help reduce traffic coming to your site that may produce spam as well. So just consider using a kind of a front-end web application firewall. Check with your hosting provider. They may even have this in place already, or may be able to help you implement certain stuff. But that actually stops the traffic before it even hits your server. The problem with it hitting your server is that your server's got to do the work to get rid of that traffic. So if you can stop it before that, then you're going to reduce the load on your server.
Sure. Yeah, what's interesting about all this too is we hadn't even got to everything on this list yet, but it definitely feels like there's not you click this button and spam's gone. It's like you need to take these proactive measures in different areas to help, increase your chances of preventing the spam. There's not a secret solution we just hadn't found yet.
Another advantage to using something like Cloudflare is if you do find yourself in a situation where something clever has come along and is hitting your site, you can switch off that traffic. So they have almost like a panic button in Cloudflare that says, "Hey, I'm getting attacked," and then you can stop it from coming through. It can also present a challenge to the user before you even hit the website as well. So it's almost like a capture for the website. And that can be used just to make sure you're only getting human traffic coming through temporarily if you want to. You can switch that on permanently as well, and it will, if it recognizes that you're a human, it will let you through. If it's, curious as to whether you're a human or not, it'll put up like a recapture challenge. So sometimes those could be a little bit of a bit for user friction to get to your website, but they're a good way of stopping malicious traffic coming through.
Well, I've seen that might be, like you said, that might be difficult on your contact page, or try to sell your client that on their contact page, because you might have legitimate visitors leave frustrated with that.
Yeah,
but I have
exactly.
seen a lot of agencies put this like on their WP login page, right?
Yeah.
So at least there's not a bot just killing that login page, which we definitely know happens. So
yeah.
So when we posted this event, I asked people for questions, and probably number one on there were questions about CAPTCHAs. So we got recapture, we have HCapture, we have Cloudflare has their own capture with Turnstyle. So before we dive into each one of those, because I think you can educate us on all of them, give us a general idea of what a CAPTCHA is and how it's trying to prevent spam.
Yeah, so a CAPTCHA essentially is put onto a form, And when you're filling that form out, it's actually analysing what you're doing on that page and trying to determine whether or not you're a human or not. If it can't determine if you're a human or not, it will usually, well, some of them will present a challenge. And that challenge may be, okay, click on the traffic lights or click on the animal head or whatever it may be. Interestingly, so these captures all have a free version, right? So you just go onto their website, you sign up, you get a site key and a secret key, and you put those details into your form plugin, and off it goes. Great, it works. There's a lot of hidden reason as well about why they do that. So the recapture, for example, from Google, that's actually feeding their autonomous vehicle program. So as you're clicking on traffic lights and signs and bridges, you're actually training their autonomous vehicle program to make sure that it knows what it's looking at. HCapture is doing a similar thing. We don't really know what's going on behind the scenes with this. So when recapture first started, you may recall in the old days, it would ask you to type in 2 words, and those words would be slightly skewed. And that was it basically working through their OCR, their optical character recognition process, to make sure that it could read scan books. So the new one, there are 2 versions of recapture. There's a version 2 and a version 3. Version 3 actually doesn't have a challenge. What it's doing is it's analysing mouse movement and what you're clicking on and stuff like that. And all of that behaviour is being sent back to Google. We'll talk about privacy in a minute, and data privacy. So essentially, the capture is there to challenge you as a human before you can actually submit that form. And there are 2 parts to a capture. There's the client side, which is what you see in the browser. So that's where it's asking you whether or not you're a human or not. And then the second part to it is on the server side. So once that human confirmation has been made, that gets submitted to the server, and then we send a request off to that capture provider, and the capture provider says, yes, the token that you've given me, I accept that as a human, you can now submit the form. So the nice thing about capture is it's a 2-layer defense. You've got the layer on the browser and a layer on the server side as well.
Okay, so based on some of what you what you shared with me already, I'm going to save the Cloudflare Turnstyle one for last. You talked a little bit already about Google reCAPTCHA, but is there anything else we should know about their options?
So I would say, capture is by far the most popular. When I last checked, there are about 93% of forms using reCAPTCHA over the others. Does that make it a better product? I don't think so. So the problem that I have with reCAPTCHA is there's a lot of kind of data capture going on about what sites you're on. The way captures work is they're actually an iframe on the page. So the user's not interacting with your site, they're actually interacting with Google servers. And Google use that information, for example, for their ad program. So they know what sites you're looking at, they know where you're going. It's all kind of intertwined into one. So just bear that in mind with reCAPTCHA. Capture, it works. If I were to use it, I would use the invisible option. So version 2 of reCAPTCHA has a challenge version and an invisible version. I'd recommend using the invisible version, and version 3 is invisible. And the reason I would recommend using the invisible version is there's less friction to the user, so they don't have to worry about doing the challenge. And secondly, it's more accessible as well. So if somebody is trying to interact with that capture who, finds it difficult to look at things or interact with the page, a challenge can be a real pain for them to have to use. So by using the invisible options, you're going to find it's going to be a lot easier for them to use that capture.
Okay. And what about HCapture?
So HCapture is a more privacy-focused, allegedly, capture system. Again, we have no idea what these systems are actually capturing, but what we have done on the blog article that we'll let everyone know about after the call, I've made a link in there to all the GDPR policies and the accessibility policies for each of these, so you can make your own mind up about which one you want to use. So HCapture is very similar to reCAPTCHA. In fact, it's actually a slot-in alternative to reCAPTCHA. It uses a lot of the same kind of tags so that if you're using recapture, you can pretty much flip out to HCapture straight away. I have found it to be a little bit slower than recapture, so in terms of user friction, it could be a little bit more of a pain to use. The current system it's using is clicking and identifying where the animal's head is. So it's a little bit strange. It kind of obscures the image. It's a bit difficult to use. I don't know what the agenda is behind that as to why they're capturing that information. But again, they do have a no challenge version as well. So I would recommend wherever you can use the no challenge version, which uses more of a kind of, looking at what you're doing with the form to determine if you're a user, as opposed to using this challenge version. Again, just makes it more accessible. So
I guess if they're using those invisible versions, they must have pretty high confidence in making those decisions, because obviously false positives on that is going to be a problem.
Yeah, and you don't want those false positives. You're going to get them. There are going to be times when that happens, but the challenge is going to give you a more accurate result, I would say. But for me, clicking on that just drives me nuts with a form. I think it's just better to get rid of that altogether.
Amen. All right, and how about Cloudflare? They have their Turnstyle option, which looks very, very similar. I've played around with it a little bit, but I honestly don't know the difference between it and recapture.
Yeah, so Cloudflare Turnstyle, fairly new. It's only been out, I want to say, for a year or two. It's very similar to recapture and capture. In fact, if you look at the icons that appear on the form, they look very, very, very similar. But the thing that Cloudflare Turnstyle did from day one is they avoided the whole pop-up challenge. So the nice thing about that is that it will just analyze what you're doing as you're interacting with the form, and pretty quickly will show a green tick and say, yeah, you're good to go. Cloudflare Turnstyle is my personal favorite. It's very easy to sign up for. It's free. I mean, they're all free, and they all have enterprise versions as well. We should mention that. But very easy to sign up for, very easy to use. I use it on all of my forms, and I just have no trouble with it. And it does a really good job of blocking form spam. I find with recapture, sometimes people have technical issues with it. It's a little bit more difficult to implement. But Cloudflare Turnstyle I found is really, really easy to use. There's also a cool WordPress plugin out there called Simple Cloudflare Turnstyle. You can get it from the plugin repo directory. It's free of charge to download. And it's a really easy way of implementing Cloudflare Turnstyle on pretty much any form plugin that's out there. Yes. So, and again, so Cloudflare Turnstyle, I think, was one of the first that actually made statements about their GDPR compliance, about being accessible, and I think the other two have tried to catch up a little bit on that. So out of the three, it's my favorite. It's not perfect by any means, but it's my personal favorite out of all the three captures that are available. And there are tens of other capture systems out there. We're talking about the three major ones.
Sure. Yeah, we'd be here all day. We don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll go into kind of the last category of options here that I wanted to touch on today. And this came up a ton inside of the questions people asked for this call. It's also been coming up in the group for years now. And it seems like a lot of people have some hotly debated opinions about a service like Clean Talk. Yeah. Or Kismet. I know a lot of people want to wipe that off the face of the earth. But let's talk about this style, like the cloud-based service style system. So why don't you start us off telling us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the way a cloud-based service works is when you submit the form to your server makes a request off to one of these cloud-based servers, and it will send to it a copy of the form submission, or part of it. So maybe it might just send the email address, or it may send the inquiry. Usually you're not going to send personal information across, but just depends on the cloud-based service that you're using. That cloud-based service will then analyze that data and then basically fire a score back to the form plugin and say, yes, I think it's yes, I think it's spam, or no, I don't think it's spam, or something in between. So the only thing that you want to consider with these is there's going to be a little bit of a delay when you submit that form, because it has to make that request off to the third-party servers and then bring the data back. So that's certainly something to consider when you're using this. So there could be a little bit of user friction there. Nowadays, I'm seeing that they're pretty quick. I mean, I was testing out Clean Talk again this week and found that it's almost immediate. So it does give a very quick result back. The other thing to consider is just data privacy, because you're sending that data off to these third-party services, and then they're analyzing it, sending it back. Again, we don't know what they're doing with that data, but I've not seen anything malicious spoken about any of these services, but it is something to consider. I know, for example, Clean Talk do have servers in Europe and in the US. So if you're in Europe, they try to send that data to European servers to help with GDPR. And again, in the blog article that we have written, we've actually put the links to those GDPR statements so that you can review those and assess whether or not you want to use them or not.
Perfect. So Clean Talk is one that I know has come up in the group a ton. And I think people's biggest complaint is it being too aggressive and people finding legitimate form submissions that have been quarantined inside of Clean Talk, which is, let's say a form submission is worth $100,000 to a company because they sell something that expensive.
Yeah.
You can't have that stuck in a quarantine folder somewhere that we never see. So
Right.
What's your experience been with Clean Talk? And is that just kind of the name of the game with this type of services? Are we going to have to deal with things being too aggressive?
Yeah, I mean, you're really at their mercy. Same with all of the, like capture as well. You're at the mercy of whether or not that system is capturing these people or not. So my personal preference, just from my experience, is I'm more of a web application firewall and a capture guy. I don't tend to rely on these third-party cloud-based services. They're not bad by any means. I mean, Clean Talk definitely has its place. One of the things I really like about Clean Talk is its ability to filter out bad email addresses. So if it finds disposable email addresses or fake email addresses or IP addresses that have been known to send blacklisted spam to people, it does a really good job of that. It's got huge databases of just bad IPs and bad email addresses. Do I use it? Not personally. I tend to find that the combination of the web application firewall and the capture does enough for me. But everybody's use case is different. But yeah, I mean, Clean Talk is super easy to implement. They have a plugin, and you just install it on WordPress, and it detects what form plugin you've got. So if you're using Gravity or Fluent Forms or WSForm, it just finds the plugin that you're using, and it basically plugs into the hooks that are available in those form plugins to process that form data automatically. So that it's really a very simple system to implement. So yeah, give it a go, see if it works for you. I'm not saying that you shouldn't use them, but personally I tend to steer clear of them. I just think it's a layer that is not required for what I do. But if you're getting really hammered badly, then it'd definitely be worth considering these tools for sure.
I think Mark might be running for office with these politically correct answers here.
I'll try not to get in trouble.
Yeah. No, I understand. Totally fair. I think everybody can read between the lines anyway. So,
Yeah.
What about Akismet? I know anything that Automatic ends up doing, people get mad about. So I don't know if that's just the bias towards Automatic or if there's actual issues with it, or kind of what's your thoughts on how it works?
Yeah, so Akismet traditionally was there to analyze comments on blogs and look for kind of malicious content or spam content in those comments. And it's kind of expanded out. So it has in fact, Jetpack uses it for their form spam. So that's tied in with Akismet. And the way Akismet works is they have an API, and you can send content to it, and then Akismet will analyze it, and it will look for bad words. And it doesn't do, as far as I'm aware, and I may be wrong on this, but I don't think it does anything like IP checking or email address checking, stuff like that. It's purely content. And so Akismet was actually one of the first spam prevention tools that we added to WSForm, because I could see that we could use it to check for bad words and stuff like that. So it's good for checking on content. Again, you've got the problem of there's an API request being made. You have to wait for it to return and come back, because there's a little bit of user friction there. I personally don't use it because of that. So I'm sure it's great for checking spam on comments on blogs and stuff like that. But for forms, I tend not to use it. But it's another tool out there if you want to use it and put it into your arsenal.
There you go. And I think free too.
Yeah. Yeah, they have. I think they've got a free version. Actually, I don't know. I think you have to pay
Maybe
for
not?
the
Okay.
API version. Yeah, I think you do. Yeah.
All right, and the last one you have listed here is OpenAI. So tell us what OpenAI is doing about this.
Yeah, so this is similar to a Kismet, but more so for kind of malicious, violent content in form content. So they have a moderation endpoint. It's actually used by their own platforms to make sure that data that's being sent to them doesn't contain bad stuff. So you can use that OpenAI endpoint to check your form. So we've done that with WSForm. You can fill out a form. You can send the content off to OpenAI. It will look at the content. If it comes back and says, hey, it's violent or bad content, then you can reject it. Now, OpenAI is still in its infant days. I mean, it's amazing what it does, but it still takes a bit of time to process that data. Understandably, I mean, it's doing a lot of work. So, of all the three, OpenAI is probably the slowest response you're going to get back. It's very infant in its infant days. So we've implemented it, and it's not really something that I'm using, but it's there if you want to use it.
And talk about not knowing what they're going to do with your data. Who knows? What
Yeah.
they're gonna do with it.
Yeah, that's ending up in a huge server farm somewhere.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, it's just we want to be on the cutting edge and trying these things and learning new things, and it's a new thing that's out there. So yeah, try it out, see if you like it.
Yeah, so what I'm gathering from you here, and one of the questions I wrote down to ask you is, you're obviously somebody that thinks about forms pretty much from the time you wake up till you go to bed. I can
Sadly,
tell,
yeah.
because I've talked to you about forms at almost every hour of the day through Facebook Messenger. So my question is like, okay, if Mark's setting up a form for his client, what is he putting on there? It sounds to me like obviously WSForm because it's the best, and then you're gonna put it behind Cloudflare and use Turnstyle as well. Is that typically your setup?
Yeah, that's my setup. So I put Cloudflare on the front end. I set up things like throttling with IP addresses in the web application firewall. The other thing we should mention as well is Cloudflare does have a WordPress plugin as well. And it's a very simple plugin, but if you install it and then connect it to Cloudflare, what it will do is tell Cloudflare that you've got a WordPress website, and it will set up the web application firewall in Cloudflare so that it's tailored for WordPress, which is a nice thing. And also the other cool thing about that is if you make an update to a post or a page or anything else in WordPress, it will send a signal to Cloudflare to clear the cache on that automatically. So it keeps everything in sync, which is quite nice. So yeah, I use Cloudflare on the front end, and then I just put Cloudflare Turnstyle on all the forms that I use.
Nice. Well, there you go. I will just follow your advice, and that's what I'll do from here on out. We could have made this a 5-minute call, Mark. We could answer that real quick.
Let's just start over.
All this talking we did for nothing. Well, let's talk a little bit about how to implement these things and what they look like. I know you put together a bit of a demo here on some of these different things, so I'm going to ask you to share your screen, and I'm going to remind everybody we are using a new software to stream this here.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's doing a great job of making his screen share big on your screen. So get out your magnifying glass, and hopefully in the replay, I can fix that and make it nice and big and beautiful. But Mark said he would be very descriptive as he goes through this.
Yeah, I'll try and make it big as well so you can see it. Hopefully it won't destroy things. But it's very, very straightforward. And what I'm going to show you, this is not just for WSForm. This is for whatever form plugin you're using. They all use the same technique. So let's just say, for example, you want to set up a recapture on your site. There are two ways of doing that in WSForm. If you go into settings and you go into spam protection, again, this will be the same on the other form plugins. You can enter in your site key and your secret key. So just to tell the difference between the two there quickly, the site key is actually a key that will appear on the front of your site. It's like a public key. And the secret key is the key that's used behind the scenes to confirm whether or not that capture has been processed properly. So in WSForm, you can put the recapture, HCapture, and Turnstyle all at a kind of global settings level, and those then apply to every form on your website. So you only have to enter them in once. The other option is to actually put those keys at a form level. And one of the advantages of doing that is that it is possible to, for example, with Cloudflare Turnstyle, you can set up multiple captures per site. So you can actually have a capture for your contact us form, one maybe for a support form, one for a calculator form, whatever you've got on your website, and then you can independently run analytics on those and see how each of those is performing on their own. So if we go into this Cloudflare demo here, I'll just show you how that's done. So I'll delete this turnstyle form here so we can start from the beginning. So all you do in WSForm is you just drag that turnstyle field wherever you want it on the form. So some form plugins will always put it like immediately above the submit button. In WSForm, you can actually position that anywhere that you want, excuse me, on the form. And you'll notice that that form is basically ready to go out of the box. So if I preview that form, you'll see there it is ready to go, verifying. I just click to verify I'm human, and that's it, done. So it's very, very straightforward. If you want to put a key that is specific to that particular form, you can just edit those field settings, and then you can just override the site key and the secret key in this little sidebar on the right-hand side. And that's really all you need to do. So setting up captures is super simple.
And all that's done through Cloudflare on the free Cloudflare account too, right?
Yeah. I just use the free version. There's no really need to go for the enterprise versions of these. I know Google has a real has quite a significant enterprise recapture product. The one thing I would say about that enterprise version is that I believe that a lot of the privacy issues about like ad stats and things like that goes out the window with their enterprise version. How much it costs, I have no idea. It's probably outside the budget of most of us sitting here. So that's, setting up Cloudflare. Again, it's very, very simple with HCapture and recapture. So with recapture, it's exactly the same. You just drag that onto your form. On WSForm, another form plugin, it's probably just there straight away. And then you can just edit that, put the keys in, or use the global keys if you want to. So that's that. And then just wanted to show CleanTalk quickly and how that works. So CleanTalk, again, you basically just install that CleanTalk plugin. Very, very easy to do that. They give you a key. So once you've signed up for the service, they give you a key. And that key is entered into the plugin. And once that's done, it's pretty much just sits there in the background and does all the work for you. So here's an example CleanTalk demo form. And I've actually put in an email address here that will trigger CleanTalk into saying, hey, that's not a good email address.
I think you're sharing a picture of
let me change the
WordPress.
Yeah, let me change that screen. I think it's that one. There we go.
Now
cool.
CleanTalk demo.
Yeah, so this is just a basic contact us form. We've got CleanTalk running in the background. I'm running this in incognito mode, and that's the reason we had to flip the screen there, because CleanTalk doesn't actually check the form if you're logged in as an administrator, because when you're testing your forms, obviously you don't want it to keep saying, no, you can't submit the form. So by using it in incognito mode, it's actually working as it would if a normal user were coming to the website. And I'm putting in an email address here that I know CleanTalk is going to use to basically force a detection that we don't want to submit this form. So if I hit submit on this, we should get a message at the bottom saying forbidden sender blacklisted. So there you go. So there's the product working. Also, if I change this to something like test at test.com and we submit that, it should detect, there we go. So it actually says mail domain for disposable emails. So it's detected that that email address is a disposable email address and won't let that form submission through. So that's, CleanTalk, it's a nice, you saw how quick that was. It was relatively quick response. And it does a good job of checking email addresses for like disposable, commonly used bad email addresses. It also does IP blacklisting and a bunch of other stuff. So definitely a system to consider for your form spam strategy.
Yeah, so you're saying that's probably something you might look at if your typical methods, Cloudflare and the Turnstyle, if that wasn't quite cutting it and you needed to ramp it up a little bit further, that might be a good option.
Yeah, add those layers in if you need to. Definitely be proactive in all of this. When you build a site for a customer, don't wait for those 100,000 emails to come through. I get emails through our support channel saying, hey, we just received 50,000 emails, and I have a look at their site. I'm like, well, you've got no spam prevention in place here. This is crazy. We do some other stuff in WSForm as well to try and prevent that spam. Like, for example, our forms generally aren't fully present on the page. If you were to come to them as a bot, they don't even see that there's a form there with the fields because we render those forms client side with JavaScript. But these bots are clever. They get around this stuff. So be proactive, put this stuff in place ahead of time, and save yourself the headache later on.
Fantastic. Well, like I said, I apologize to y'all for that screen share being small. That's totally my fault on testing something.
That's fine.
As we do it live here. All right, so I want to move in here to some Q&A. We have some questions already coming in the live chat. I appreciate that from everyone. We're going to do our best to get to those. So if you do have questions, go ahead and put those in the chat now. I'm going to start us off with some of the questions that were submitted when people registered for this call. We marked a few of them here to go over. So David had asked, do honeypots that some form plugins have, or I'm sorry, some form plugins have honeypots. Does that make any difference? And we talked about that a little bit, but general idea, I know you kind of went through all of this, and why I wanted to re-ask is, you said it can do some, but it's not going to do everything. Do you even bother turning that on personally, or no?
Personally, I don't. I don't see any harm with switching it on. You know, nowadays it seems to work pretty well. Like I said in the past, there were some issues with Safari, but if someone's in a panic, then I usually say, look, get your honeypot switched on. That's just a checkbox. I mean, it's one of the simplest things to enable. It doesn't require any keys or anything like that. So just find out where that is in your form plugin, switch it on, and let it do its work in the background. So it's just another layer to the pie.
I love analogies. So to me, that's like, okay, well, if people are breaking in your house, at least lock the door. Like, you just reach over there and lock the door, and then it's better than nothing.
Put some cling film up that they have to get through first. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. We'll go Home Alone style on them. So another question we had asked is, if I enable Clean Talk on my site, will it automatically hook into WSForm? And I saw when we just did this in your little demo, it seemed like you just had installed the plugin, put in your API key or whatever, and it automatically worked. Is that true of most plugins that you know, or most form plugins that you know of? Does Clean Talk just automatically get in there? Or
yeah.
is that something specific you've built?
No, nothing specific we built. They actually manage that on their side. So they have a file in their plugin for all the integrations, and it detects if you've got Gravity, Fluent, WSForm, a bunch of other form plugins, and will automatically just work in the background. So there's nothing that you need to do. You don't have to add any code to your site or anything. Off it goes. So yeah, implementation wise, super easy.
Absolutely. Man, I'm going through these questions, and so many of these, obviously I read them before we did the call, but so many of these we've already answered. You know, we had a lot of people asking about how Clean Talk works and if that's a good solution.
Even about my accent, that's been answered.
You know, yeah, that's what I was saying here. Marcus asked the most important question, which was, when is Mark going to stop using that fake British accent? And I told him it would be epic if he just dropped it in the middle of this call, but I don't think it's going to happen.
I should have used an AI voice changer just to really confuse everyone.
Yeah, we could have definitely done it. All right, so let's check out some of these questions here from the chat. Matt asked in here, is Mark using Cloudflare's rate limiting for IP throttling?
Yes, I am. Yeah, great thing to implement. Some bots are clever in that they come in from different IP addresses, so do bear that in mind. But those that just come in and hammer from the same IP address over and over again, that IP throttling is a great little feature. Again, very, very easy to set up. You just have to say, right, if the IP address matches within a certain period of time, then reject those requests. I think on the free version of Cloudflare, I may be wrong on this, but I believe that the time period in which you can choose changes depending on the Cloudflare level of account that you have. So the higher paid accounts let you do it kind of within a minute. The other ones, I think, are within a larger time scale. But whichever plan you're on, implement it. It's worth doing. And that can be good, you know, not only for forms, but just other things on your website as well. If you've got an e-commerce site and someone's coming in and hitting you with like add to carts, I mean, that's filling your database up. So by having that IP throttling, you can prevent people from doing that kind of thing.
Okay, nice. Carlo asked in here, what about using conditional logic to enable the submit button? Would that be sufficient, and is it accessible?
It's another layer. for sure. It's a client-side layer, so it's probably one of the weakest lines of defense you're going to get. It's certainly something you can do with conditional logic. So in WSForm, you can say, if any condition, enable or disable that submit button. The problem with that, though, is on the server side, I can still just submit that form and completely bypass the form that's presented to the user. I could just send a packet of data to the server that would effectively be sent when you click submit on that form. So yeah, it's a client-side prevention measure, but it's not one of the strongest for sure. Just a couple of other things that we probably want to mention, Carl, as well, is consider also using a nonce on your form is something that you can do. Only use it if you know what a nonce is. So a nonce is a number only used once. But in WordPress, a nonce is not a number only used once. And that's one thing to bear in mind. It's actually a code that gets put onto a form that has a shelf life of between 12 and 24 hours. And on the server end, it checks that nonce and it says, okay, is that nonce valid or not? And if it's not, it rejects the form application. So within a kind of a day window, a nonce can be a thing to bear in mind. One thing to be careful of with a nonce is if you're using caching on your site, that nonce can get cached on the form as well. And you can find that you're going to get false submissions coming through because the nonce is basically stale. So with that, you want to kind of keep your page caching down, I think, to about 10 hours is a good idea. And then you shouldn't get any problem with those nonces expiring. Another thing that I wanted to mention as well is that a lot of form plugins also have, for the developers that are out there, they have hooks that enable you to take the form submission and analyze that yourself. So I know one of the questions that we got was about spam keyword block lists. So if you are a PHP coder and you want to stop certain words coming through, then you can also use hooks with these form plugins to block that content coming through as well.
All right, Mark asks in here, does multiple spam fighting features have a negative or positive effect?
Positive effect in terms of reducing spam, negative effect in terms of potentially user friction, in terms of the time it takes to submit the form or have to interact with challenges. Also, the more things that you implement, the more likely you are of having false negatives, coming through. So, yeah, it's just a careful balance, and using what combination you think is going to give you the best outcome.
And I imagine the answer changes depending on what the site is too. If it's Joe the plumber in your little local town, he's probably not dealing with the same problems that some huge e-commerce store that has hundreds of thousands of visitors a day is dealing with.
Exactly. So. Yeah, but it also depends on the age of the website as well, right? So when you launch a new website, you're usually home free. I mean, no one knows who you are. But over the years, your site just ends up on lists galore all over the place and will eventually be victim to a spam attack at some point. So again, be proactive.
Yeah, I mean, I tongue-in-cheek put Eric Jones's name in the subtitle of this little event because I knew everybody who would potentially want to watch this would know exactly what I'm talking about. But that seemed to affect everyone for a long amount of time. Like, by the fact that everybody here knows exactly what I'm talking about, do you know anything specific about what was going on with that, or maybe why it's slowed down recently?
I don't. I have no idea. I just know that name was you. I mean, it caused quite a lot of media stir when that happened. So, it's great. I mean, form spam comes in lots of different flavors, right? So you've got some that are really trying to sell you stuff. You've got others that are just utter rubbish being sent to your site over and over again to try and slow your website down. So, I don't know. I don't know the whole backstory behind that one. In the UK, we usually use the term Joe Blogs rather than Eric Jones, so maybe there's a different story over there.
Matt Essen here. For service-based clients or sites, should we consider just a blanket Cloudflare challenges for all visitors outside their region? I figure that could reduce spam and bots, but concerns on crawlers, etc.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea. Yeah, I mean the site challenge is, relatively straightforward. If it detects that you're a human, you don't even have to interact with it. It's just a small pause before the site comes up. I believe it then kind of sets a cookie on that site so that any visitors after that can come in fairly easily. So yeah, that would definitely be possible with Cloudflare. I know one of the other.
You can do it on like a per page basis too. So you might
Yes, you
not
can.
have to have that on your homepage when, if
Yeah.
everybody's landing on your homepage, you might not want to challenge them right there. But
Right.
if they make it to that contact page or the login page or whatever it may be, okay, well, maybe they've already made a few clicks. They're probably not going to bounce as easily. They're not going to be as frustrated that quickly. So maybe you can be a little more sparing about where you put it.
You can also do it at a kind of a firewall rule level as well. So you can say if this condition is met, then throw a challenge back to the user. So that's another way you can do it. One of the other things that we should maybe just quickly mention before we wrap up is on HCapture. They've got an interesting system for accessibility. So if you are a user that has trouble using HCapture, you can actually go to their website and almost sign up to say, hey, if you see me on a website, let me through straight away. And that's quite a nice feature. The only problem is not many people use HCapture. So,
but wouldn't whoever's running the bots just go sign up and say,
of course they would.
Right through?
Of course they would. Yeah.
It seems
there you
kind
go.
of short-sighted. We had one in here. Let's see. What will probably be the last one. WSForms also has the option for human check. What about that? Mark's just back here behind the computer checking every form to make sure it seems legit. And if it is, he lets it through. If not, he stops it.
That's what I do. That's why I'm always online. No, so we have this thing called human presence in WSForm, which is another form spam prevention measure. And it was one of the early AI attempts at detecting if someone was a human on your website. Quite a nice system because there's no friction with it. There's no accessibility issues. So you can sign up for human presence. I think they used to give you one site for free. I'm not sure if they still do that. But you sign up for it, you just enable it, you install the human presence plugin alongside WSForm, and they kind of detect each other, and you can go into human presence and say, yes, I want to protect this form, this form, and this form, and it just works in the background. So what it's basically doing is it's analyzing mouse clicks, mouse movement, interaction with fields, touch events, typing characters in, anything like that to determine whether or not you're a human. And if it thinks you're a human, it lets the form submission through, otherwise it blocks you. So there's another system to have a look at. If you go on to the WSForm site, if you do a search for spam in the knowledge base, there's a page there about how to prevent spam as well. And that lists some of the things that we are specifically integrated in with. And we're trying to find new platforms as well. So there are a couple of others that we're actually working on right now to improve the set of tools that we're integrated in with. Always looking for new ways of doing it. I've also considered trying to write our own one. So with Capture, you can actually do self-hosted capture. The downside to that is you kind of open your site up to a lot of data traffic being generated as a result of people coming to your pages, and that's really where these capture services come in, because they handle all of that for you. So I'm sticking with what's out there rather than writing my own for the moment. I need some sleep as well. So.
No doubt. Well, I was kind of a late adopter of WSForm, but man, now that I've fully adopted, I cannot go back to using anything else. It's been really, really awesome. So I want to tell you a huge thank you on that. And I want to give you an opportunity to kind of tell us a little bit more about what makes your plugin different than some of the others, and why it exists, and give us the full pitch on it.
Well, it exists because I was an agency owner, and we were kind of frustrated with the form plugins that were out there. I mean, they're all great. You know, they've all got their own place. They've all got their own strengths and weaknesses.
Politician Mark's back.
Yeah, exactly. But I see these people at work camp. I've got to be careful. I still want my beer, you know. But yeah, so we found that responsiveness was an issue with form plugins. We found the time it took to develop forms was an issue. Conditional logic was quite limited. So we just decided to build our own. What we thought was going to be a 6-month project is now 5 years in. It's become quite the beast. But yeah, we have quite a great following with web developers and people that build websites for a living, or manage a website for a living. And really the idea behind it is to be able to build simple but also complex forms very, very quickly without any code. So we have a lot of checkboxes in the product that just enable functionality and make it super simple. And one of the features I love the most is our debug console. So if you haven't tried our debug console, give it a go. If you've got a form with 20 fields on it. Traditionally, you'd have to fill out all those fields, hit submit. Oh, it didn't work. Fill it all out again, hit submit. With our debug console, it automatically fills out the form in one click. It's pretty cool. So it'll detect like first name fields and last name fields and put names in, and it puts phone numbers in, and it'll even put passwords in. If you fill out a number field, it'll check min and max on those to make sure it's within those ranges. So it tries to do as good a job as possible with filling that form out for you. And really, that just speeds up that process. The debug console was the first thing.
Test a form 15 times in a row, you know?
Yeah, particularly when you've got an integration, right? So if you've got an integration that you're working with, maybe doing something a little bit more complex, maybe with Salesforce, you're going to be hitting that submit button a few times to make sure that data comes through properly, and that's where that really comes in. But if you go to WSForm.com, have a look on the homepage, and there's a video there showing you some of the key features, and you can learn more about it.
I did want to throw in my sales pitch on that. Is I think part of the reason I was hesitant to move, I mean, obviously, once you invest all your client projects into one tool, then it's such a huge pain in the butt to move. So that's part of it. But I think the amount of customization that's available in WSForm can be really overwhelming if you're not the developer type. I imagine developer-y type people see that, and that's what they get excited about, and less developer-y, more design-y type people like me that get a little bit nervous of all these things are a little bit overwhelmed by it. But what I was actually surprised with is once I just opened it up and used it for 10 minutes, I started realizing that, okay, all these options are here, but a lot of this is like extra. So many things are automatically done for you that I actually spend less time building forms in WSForm than I did in previous systems, even though there's a lot more I could do there. So much of it is done for you automatically. And you even mentioned like the responsive thing it's a small thing, but it's a huge thing. Being able to change, how many columns are, in this form at all the different breakpoints. Why every form plugin hasn't figured out a great way to do that really easily is kind of beyond me, because you look at what's inside WSForm and it's like, oh yeah, they should all just do this. You just kind of drag
just a key feature.
You want each field to be. Yeah,
for sure.
Pretty awesome.
Cool. Well, thank you. Thank you for your support. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I apologize for being just a terrible host on you today, but you showed
been great.
How awesome you are by just handling it like a pro. So I appreciate that. I have lots of editing to do now, so it definitely wasn't my intention, because I hate editing more than anything. Now I got to edit all this out and make it make
I think you should just leave it in for comedic value.
Probably just out of pure laziness, I will.
Yeah, you should.
That's how much I hate editing videos. So. Well, fantastic. Well, Mark is a awesome member of the admin bar community too. So if you have more questions that we didn't get to, or something else comes up, or you run into any problems here, he actually loves answering all these questions. So ping him in the group, and do it in a thread so we can all grab a little bit of value from it. But I know he hangs out there quite a bit. And Mark, I really appreciate your help on all this today. I feel like I know so much more about this than I did yesterday. Before I woke up today. And I've been dealing with it for years and years now. And it took, a fairly simple conversation for me to feel like I got a pretty good handle on this. And that's thanks to you. So I really do appreciate that.
Great. Well, yeah, hope people have learned something today. And hopefully their form span troubles will fly away.
They're gone.
That's it.
Is officially gone. Done. All right. Y'all have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.